Beshem Hashem na'aseh v'natzliach. We spoke in part 1 of this Dvar Torah, Vayelech Moshe, that Moshe is doing his last halicha, is Vayelech. This is the penultimate journey before he actually dies and goes up to the Shamayim. He's doing his last halicha in Olam Hazeh, and he's going down to the people. He's going to speak to the people. He's going to go teach the people. He's going to go menachem the people. He gave all the interpretations of what does Vayelech mean. And we ended off with Moshe Wolfson, who explained that, every Jewish neshama, Yisrael, Yeshishim ribot otiyot Torah, every single Jewish neshama corresponds to a letter in the Torah. And he says that the 600,000 root souls have their spots in the Torah, but really every generation has his root in the Torah. And therefore, now that we're on the last day of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, the last parashot of the Torah, this is now the section that corresponds to the last generations, the last souls of the Jewish people. It corresponds to Ikva de Mashiach, the heels of the Mashiach, that time in the future, that time that more specific we are in right now that is so dark. It's a time of Choshech. It's so much lower. We're so much further away from Matan Torah. We're so much further away from the clarity of the Torah. But Moshe Rabbeinu is taking himself. He's bringing his light from up above. Vayelech Moshe, in these last pesukim, he's bringing the light to the furthest generations, to us, the Ikva the Mashiach. But Moshe Rabbeinu has to be careful because he can't blind us. Therefore, he's leaving the top and he's coming down below so it doesn't blind us. Okay. If during the Het HaEgel, while the Jewish people were sinning, when the Jewish people were on their low, in that great lofty level, the Jewish people, the Dor De'ah, when they were on a low level, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Lech Red, go down. You can't be in the heavens if your people down below are sinning. You're their leader. You got to be with your people. Lech Red. Well, right now, and Vayelech, the last day of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, now Moshe Rabbeinu, the Mefarshim explain, is independently awakening himself. I got to be a Vayelech. I got to come down to those last Jewish people. I got to come down mystically to the souls of the lowest generation, the last letters of the Torah, as Rashi tells us that the last pasuk is corresponding to the Shivrei Luchot, the Shivrei Luchot, those broken generations, those future generations. Moshe Rabbeinu now independently is doing his own red to come down to us, to give us the Torah, the light that we need. We just read in the Musaf of Rosh Hashanah, we spoke about Hashem coming down to us, Be'ar Palei Tohar. The word Ar Palei, actually, is a big debate. Ar Palei, Ar Pile, what's the vowels? Ayin, the different machzors. My machzor gives down 2 approaches. But Hashem came down to us, Ar Palei Tohar, which means that Hashem revealed himself in these clouds that are pure. They're clouds, but they're pure. But that's a bit of a contradiction in terms, because the idea is once you have clouds, you lose some of the light. You lose the tohar, you lose the purity. So the Mefarshei Machzor, they explain, no. What it means is Hashem's light is so great that we couldn't handle it. It would blind us. So we need those filters. We need those sunglasses. We need the clouds to filter it down so we could experience the light. So we're trying to say that's what Moshe is doing in our parasha, Vayelech Moshe. He's now going to have to filter down the light to be able to connect the last letters of the Torah to the last generations of the Jewish people. Okay. So Moshe, so to speak, is being metzamtzem himself in order to connect to us. Now we mentioned from the Targum Yonatan that Vayelech Moshe, that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to the Beit Midrash, and we mentioned from the Abir Yaakov that he's telling us, don't worry, even if he dies, the Torah that he knew that we weren't zocheh to learn just yet, that didn't come out, that wasn't written down, that we were going to forget. He says, don't worry, we're going to come up with those chidushim, the chidushim of the future generations, of the later generations. Moshe Rabbeinu says, don't worry, I'm menachem you. It's going to come out. It's still going to be there. Now, I was thinking, Ulai, maybe we can say that Moshe's last journey, this Vayelech, is actually an echo of the Torah that Moshe was acquiring in the Beit Midrash of Rebbe Akiva. If Moshe Rabbeinu wants to connect to the furthest of the generations, that's going to require a little bit of help. Lessons that don't necessarily come as naturally to Moshe Rabbeinu, he's going to have to learn. But those lessons are the legacy of Rebbe Akiva. Rebbe Akiva, the pillar of the Torah Shebaal Peh, the oral Torah, the Torah of the Baal Teshuvah, the Ben Gerim, the person who elevated himself up to the Pardes, dies al Kiddush Hashem, is able to doresh the crowns of the letters, reaches the level of the Sha'ar Nun, the 50th gate of Binah. Rebbe Akiva is the one who can go from the lowest, darkest point, and then at that point he's able to reveal the greatest light. Now let's look at the Gemara, the Gemara Menachot, Daf Kaftet Amud Bet, which retells the story, this mystical story of Moshe Rabbeinu going to the Beit Midrash of Rebbe Akiva. Okay, says the Gemara. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav. בשעה שעלה משה למרום, מצאו לקדוש ברוך הוא שיושב וקושר כתרים לאותיות. When Moshe Rabbeinu went up to the Marom, he went up to get the Torah. Now, many seem to learn simply this Gemara is speaking about when he goes to get the Torah, that means like the first Torah. I actually don't think, I said this in the past, and I'm going to say even more based on our Dvar Torah over here. It seems to me that Moshe Rabbeinu Anutati is going up to get the second luchot right now. This seems to be much more of a discussion of the oral Torah, of the drashot on the Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu was going up to get the second Torah right now. After the Jewish people had sinned, he goes up, and what does he see? Now, after the Jewish people had sinned, after they were on such a low level, now he comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he sees that Hashem is being Yoshev. I saw the Mefarshim bring down when you're sitting in the Gemara, you're doing deep things. Standing was more pashut, but the kashot, the more difficult things to learn, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is being Yoshev, Bekosher Ketarim La'otiyot, and Hashem is crowning letters on the Torah. These crowns are known as the tagin, those little vav zayins, those little zayin, little specks, that little flicks of the quill that go on top of the letters. He's making the crowns, the tagin of the letters, and he sees that Hashem is doing that. Amar lefanav, Ribono shel olam, he says, God, mi ma'akev al yadecha. Who's holding you back? What's holding you back? Who is it? What do we need these drashot for? What do we need these crowns for? What do we need these ornaments? Amar lo Adam echad yesh atid liot besof kama dorot. Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, there's one man who's going to be in many generations in the future. Akiva ben Yosef shemo she'atid lidrosh al kol kotz vekotz tilin shel halachot. And he's going to be able to doresh on every single little tag, every little crowd, every little kotz, every little spike. Tilin shel halachot, mounds and mounds, mountains and mountains of halachot. So for the sake of his Torah, we're going to hold back the Torah to crown those letters. Now, again, it seems to me that if we're talking about crowning letters, the oral Torah, Rebbe Akiva, this is really the Torah of the second luchot. Actually, if we get a little mystical, they said it's only after the shvira that we have the tagin. So again, over here, only after the shvirat luchot will we be zochet to crowns on the new luchot lanutati. I think we're talking about here the second luchot. Also note the way the Gemara tells us that this is besof kamadarot. We're dealing with after many generations, one with different challenges, one where there's more darkness, one where there's different understandings. Moshe is going to need to learn the Torah of the future generations. As we said, the light needs to be filtered a bit more, held back a little bit more when we want to get to those later generations. Rebbe Akiva now is the later generations, the sof adorot. That was Moshe Rabbeinu was trying to understand. What's the Torah? How do I relate? How do I teach? What is that Torah for the sof adorot? He also asks in a language of mi me'akev al yadecha. Who is holding you back? If we're dealing with the crowns, which she said in the past is the deepest sodot, it's the sha'ar nun, it's the 50th gate. Well, look at the language of mi. Mi is gematria 50. Mi is also known to be a hint to Binah, to the 50th gate of Binah, the who, it's the mystery, it's the question. Mi bara ele. It's this idea of we want to try to understand HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe was wondering, is there really somebody who's capable of understanding this deep Torah? Is there really someone who can get to the Sharnon, could get to the Mi Gematria 50? Is there really someone who can jump into the Yam Gematria 50 and really get that deep? The Torah that's now coming down Mina Shamayim, that's coming down to the people, it's Lo B'Shamayim Hi. It's not a Torah, a black fire and a white fire of the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but it's a more Gashmi Torah that now refers to the mitzvot for the people. So what do we need these crowns on these letters? I'm not bringing down the heavenly Torah. I'm bringing down the Torah for the Jewish people, for mankind. I actually saw in a footnote in the fancy Tiferet Yisrael of the Maharal in Siman Samech Dalid, where he actually entertains, the crowning of the letters is happening now in the Shamayim. Is our Gemara dealing with our regular letters, or maybe the Gemara is speaking about crowning the fiery letters in the Shamayim? Okay, but Hashem then responds that there is someone who's going to grasp it, there is someone who's going to doresh it. It's the holy Rebbe Akiva. So Moshe Rabbeinu goes on, he says, Amar lefanav Ribono shel olam harei li. He says, I want to see this person. Amar lo hazor le'achorecha. Hashem tells him, go, chazor la'achorecha. Look back, go back. We're going to return B'ezrat Hashem to these words. What does it mean, chazor la'achorecha? What's the achorecha? So it says, halach v'yashav besof shmone shurot. And Moshe Rabbeinu went and he sat in the 8th row behind Rebbe Akiva's study hall. We see that at this point, he's not so close to Rebbe Akiva. In the Shamayim, Rebbe Akiva's Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu's Torah, on the surface, it looks like Moshe Rabbeinu's further away. He's back at the 8th row. There's actually a different gear, so it says he's in the 18th row. B'ezrat Hashem, I'll get back to these numbers. V'lo haya yodea mahem omrim. And he didn't understand what they were saying. Tashash kocho. And Moshe Rabbeinu's strength waned. He became weak, as if his Torah knowledge was deficient. He wasn't fully there. Tashash kocho. Now we mentioned in part 1 of this Dvar Torah that the Torah tells us, Rashi told us, Moshe was never tashash kocho. He never lost his strength. Now it could be Rashi speaking on the physical level, but it seems to be that even on the spiritual level, Moshe Rabbeinu always wanted the Torah, but rather it was at the end of Moshe Rabbeinu's life that Hashem is closing up his well springs of Torah to make room for Yoshua, it's kind of like Hashem is making Moshe Rabbeinu be metashesh kocho. He's making Moshe's strength wane, or maybe we're going to see he's making Moshe Rabbeinu get a little bit weaker so that he can be able to handle this Torah of the future generation. Maybe this is part of the cloud, the filter, the sunglasses that Moshe Rabbeinu needs to wear. So really, it's not a real tashash kocho. It's a forced tashash kocho to be able to relate to later generations. Okay. Now, we can also say a little more simply that this tashash kocho, this getting weak, is only temporary. Because literally the next line says, Kevan she'egia ledavar echad, when Rebbe Akiva finally came to this davar echad, we'll get back to what is this davar echad, he became to some teaching, Amru lo tamidav, Rabbi, minayin lach, at that point, the student said, where does the rabbi know this from? I mean, you can say maybe even a little deeper, how are you being kosher this to the letters? We'll get back to that idea. Amar lahen, halacha leMoshe miSinai. He says, no, this is halacha leMoshe miSinai. This is part of our tradition. It goes all the way back to Moshe Rabbeinu, nityashva da'ato. So at that point, now Moshe Rabbeinu, he was put at ease, nityashva da'ato. He's no longer tashash kocho, so we see it was only temporary. Now, according to at least one approach, Moshe Rabbeinu is right now learning the Torah of Rebbe Akiva. I mean, the one approach says that Moshe Rabbeinu understands that, this is the light that's inside of his light, and therefore he can never fully understand it. But there's another approach that says that Moshe Rabbeinu now, in this Gemara, Moshe Rabbeinu is beginning to learn the Torah of Rebbe Akiva, and as the discussion continues with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe is going to learn more and more to finally grasp this davar echad. That basically in the timeline, Moshe Rabbeinu took a stop in the physical world, went up, didn't understand right now, but by the end of the story, or maybe by some later point in his life, Moshe Rabbeinu will actually be able to get to this level, and that's why he's put at ease right now, that now, nityashva da'ato, because, it's going to be okay, I'm actually going to learn this. If Rebbe Akiva is saying, it's halacha leMoshe miSinai, I'm eventually going to know this, I'm going to get there myself. So if this is true, our Gemara is telling us that Moshe Rabbeinu needs to leave his world, leave his generation, and go to a later generation. Sofa Darot, go to Rebbe Akiva, and at first it's not going to make sense. But slowly but surely, he's going to get there. As Rebbe Akiva gives us chizuk, halacha leMoshe miSinai, eventually it's going to be Moshe's Torah, but this story is Moshe learning how to understand the Torah, and teach the Torah, and relate the Torah, and filter the Torah, so it's going to fit the future generations. We mentioned in the past that according to many Mefarshim, Moshe Rabbeinu dabbled in the 50th gate of wisdom throughout his life, that he might have gotten it at Matan Torah, lost it by the Ego, at the end of his life goes to Har Nevo, Nun Bo, he finally gets there at the end of his life. So maybe we can say that right now it's the end of his life. Right now, this is the journey to get to the Sha'ar Nun. This is the journey to get to those crowns of the letters that's taking place on this last day of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. Now, the Midrash tells us that Rebbe Akiva and his colleagues, Rebbe Akiva v'chaverav, they were able to see giluim of Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu, even Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't see. So it sounds like from the Midrash that it reaches higher levels. You know about Rebbe Akiva, that he goes up to the Pardes, he goes in B'Shalom, he leaves B'Shalom. So it seems to be that Rebbe Akiva, even in his lifetime, was reaching certain levels that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't reach until the very, very end. But now in our parasha, it is the very end. So now came the time for Moshe Rabbeinu to actually learn those deep hidden secrets that Rebbe Akiva had. Although the truth of the matter is, I'm not 100% clear on this. We're going to see in a second from the Maharal that it could be that part of the reason why Rebbe Akiva and his colleagues could reach such high levels is because they themselves also are going to die b'Kiddush Hashem, and that might be the ticket there as well. But nevertheless, we actually mentioned in the past from Rabbi Kahn's essay on the crowns of the letters, in a Sefer Crowns of the Letters, that in real time it appears that Rebbe Akiva picks it up where Moshe Rabbeinu leaves off. That on the surface level, there's a lot of parallels between Moshe Rabbeinu, the amount of years that they lived, the 120, the side stories with their wives, the water and the stone motifs. But more than their lives being similar, there seems to be a progression that Rebbe Akiva is finishing off where Moshe Rabbeinu starts, and that's really the symbol of Moshe Rabbeinu being the Torah Shevichtav, and Rebbe Akiva being the Torah Sheba'al Peh, bringing out what's inside the Torah Shevichtav. It's like the 2.0. Rabbi Kahn also notes in one of his footnotes there that we find this language of tashash kocho, that Moshe feels weak after the Egel, when Hashem tells him, Lech red. If you open up the Gemara in Berachot, this is Lamed Bet, Amud Bet, says the Gemara, Vaydaber Hashem Moshe, Lech red. Hashem tells Moshe, go down. My Lech red, Amar Rabbi Elazar, says Rabbi Elazar, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe, Moshe, red migdulatecha, Moshe, go down from your greatness. Klum natati lecha gdula ela b'shvil Yisrael. Did I not give you? Isn't the only reason why I gave you your greatness is because of the Jewish people? You know, it's not for your sake. You know, b'achshav Yisrael chatu ata lamali. You know, now the Jewish people have sinned. You know, your prominence, your gedula, your greatness. Why does that matter? The only reason you have greatness is for the Jewish people. At that moment, when Hashem told him, Lech Red, you got to go down, which we said in the past, he has to go from that level of Lech, Lamed Kaf, 50, down to Red, go down to the 49th level, Miyad Tashash Kocho Shel Moshe. At that moment, Moshe Rabbeinu became weak. He couldn't even speak anymore. We know Moshe is always Kvad Peh, Kvad Lashon. It's always hard for him to speak, Rabbi Nachman has a deep idea about shtika, of being quiet. That sometimes when the hardest parts happen in life, the best thing he can do. We know Vaydoma Haron, when we had when his sons died, trying to get to their Shar Nuna B'Kadosh Baruch Hu. Well, the only thing he could do was to be Vaydom, to be quiet, to be silent. Okay, but then when Hashem tells Moshe, hold me back, at that point when Moshe is like not holding Hashem at all. Why is Hashem telling Moshe to hold him back from destroying the Jewish people with the golden calf? Why is Hashem saying that? Amar Moshe, davar ze teloi bi. Oh, I still have a big role. I'm the one that's supposed to save the Jewish people. I'm the one that's supposed to hold the Kadosh Baruch Hu back. I'm supposed to fight with Hashem right now to save them. Miyad amad v'nitchazek b'tfilah u'bikesh rahamim. And then at that moment, he stepped it up. He prayed, bikesh rahamim, and saved the Jewish people from the Egel HaZahav. So meaning the Tashash Kocho was only for a moment. Because the Tashash Kocho seems to happen when there's this level that now became beyond reach. But in doing so, a brand new Torah, a brand new Avodah opens up. And that's why I think it's so beautiful. The brand new Torah that actually opens up is this Torah Sheba'al Peh. So Moshe Rabbeinu was coming from the Torah Shebechtav and now has to move towards the world of Torah Sheba'al Peh. It's not easy, but the Torah Sheba'al Peh itself comes with a major koach. It comes with the real concept of Lo B'Shamayim that the power is now with the Jewish people down below. Okay. Back to our Gemara. Continues the Gemara of Menachot, Kaftet Amud Bet. Hazar uba lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Now he returns to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amar lefanav, Ribono shel olam. He says to God, I don't understand. Yesh lecha adam kazeh. You have such a great Rebbe Akiva who understands these crowns. Vatano ten Torah al yadi, and you give the Torah to me? Amar lo, says Hashem, shtok. Be quiet. Silence. Again, it's Rabbi Nachman. In the silence, you're going to have this. Kach alaba machshava. This was my original thoughts. These are my machshava. In the realm of machshava, we'll get back to this in a second. This is Kach alaba machshava lefanai. Amar lefanav. So he responds Moshe. Ribono shel olam, aritani torato, v'areini scharo. You showed me his Torah. If this is so great, if he's crowning, if the letters, the crowns, the tagim, the ktarim, that's Rebbe Akiva's. So show me what's his sachar. Amar lo hazor le'achorecha. He said again, go back. Chazar le'achorav. Ra'ash shokelin b'sra b'mekolin. And then the saddest story, he was taken to the shuk, to the meat market, and he sees the flesh of Rebbe Akiva being weighed to be sold. Amar lefanav, responds Moshe, Ribono shel olam, zo Torah v'zo schara. This is the Torah, this is the reward, that his flesh is being sold in the shuk. Amar le shtok. He says to Moshe Rabbeinu, be silent. This is my machshava. This is my original intention. This is what it's all about. So we have twice HaKadosh Baruch Hu telling Moshe Rabbeinu, shtok, be quiet. This is my machshava. Now, many of the commentators learn that our Gemara represents the teaching that originally Hashem wanted to create the world with strict deen. Bereshit bara Elokim. Elokim is the language of deen. Originally Hashem wanted a world that's deen so we could really earn what we deserve. And if a world on strict justice with strict punishment, that is the greatest man can be. But Hashem saw that the world couldn't last, so he joined in Rahamim, symbolized that when Hashem actually creates the world, it says that Hashem Elokim Yud Kei Vav Kei, the name symbolizing Rahamim, that this whole story is that really I'm dealing with Rebbe Akiva on the level of deen, that in Hashem's machshava, the concept of strict deen, it's such a high level, but if Hashem thought about doing that originally, there's still space for that. There's still people who Hashem will deal with deen, because that really is the better way. Because that way the person really earns what he deserves. And even if his Olam Hazeh is going to be destroyed, there's going to be punishment, there's going to be suffering, but his Olam Haba, Yishtabach Shem Olad, because he's dealing with the real level of deen. Hashem kept the level of deen for the tzaddikim. And that's the story of Rebbe Akiva. Now Rabbi Khan in his sefer, he notes that deen is also in the story of Moshe Rabbeinu. If we're talking about the parallels of Moshe and Rebbe Akiva, Moshe is also being dealt with. He's being judged kechuta sara, like a little hair's breadth. And because of hitting the rock, he can never enter Eretz Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu is also that tzaddik who's being dealt with on the level of deen. So Moshe Rabbeinu is being seen Rebbe Akiva. Really, if Moshe Rabbeinu, look at yourself. Hashem is dealing with you in the exact same way. Now, many learn that Moshe Rabbeinu is asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu the question of theodicy. Why do bad things happen to good people? Now, Rabbi Khan notes that Hashem doesn't actually show Moshe Rabbeinu that Rebbe Akiva is dying on Kiddush Hashem with Shema Yisrael, meaning there's a second part to the story. The part before his flesh is being sold in the shuk, Rebbe Akiva is giving his final drasha, which many say that's the Davar Echad. He's saying Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. That he's really teaching the Jewish people that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is everywhere and belongs in everywhere. And he wants to give up. He even wants to give HaKadosh Baruch Hu his neshama if he could. That would be like, oh, Rebbe Akiva, for him it's not bad. He's a tzaddik. He's on that level of the deen. That's not what Hashem shows him. Hashem rather just shows him what we see here down below, the flesh that's sold in the market, the torture, the pain, the yisurim. I think Hashem is going to tell Moshe Rabbeinu that there's a much deeper lesson of darkness, of choshech, of pain, of suffering, of yisurin that exists in this world. So Lav Dafka is the lesson that Rebbe Akiva understood and is willing to accept, does it be'ahava, that the lesson he's really teaching him is that in the world itself, to the outsider, to the onlooker, the choshech is here, the darkness is here, and that's a part of who we are. Now, we mentioned in the past that Rebbe Akiva is known as the Baal Tshuva, and the level of the Sha'ar Nun is the Makom Shebal Tshuva Omed, where the Baal Tshuva stands. That's even Tzaddik Amor can't stand. That the real Sha'ar Nun is related to Shuvah. But maybe we could say that with Moshe Rabbeinu going on this final journey to get to the Sha'ar Nun, he's now being seen pain and suffering, that we know from the lowest of the low, we can get to the highest of the high. But part of the lowest of the low is not just the Ben Gerim, the Baal Tshuva, but also the pain, the suffering, the darkness. It's only at that lowest level can we find a ticket to get to the highest level. And again, I think Lanut Dati, Moshe is only allowed to get it once he dies, once he leaves over here. Because even now in our story, Hashem is telling him, go chazor la'achor, look at the achor. Chazal tell us Moshe Rabbeinu only gets to see the back of Hashem's tefillin, the achor. But Rebbe Akiva was zocher to see the front. He's the one that can see the lifnim. So I want to come back to this idea that it's through the suffering, the yisurim, that Moshe Rabbeinu is going to be able to see some of the biggest light, and he has to get that lesson from Rebbe Akiva, who had that suffering, Rebbe Akiva and his colleagues, and it's going to be through that suffering of the 10 martyrs that they're going to get to the Sha'ar Nun. But first, I want to come back to this, to the bigger question of this Gemara that's bothering everyone, and look at a couple more approaches that I think will help us in building our idea. So how could Moshe Rabbeinu not understand something in the Torah that Rebbe Akiva does? Moshe Rabbeinu is supposed to know everything. It's Torat Moshe. Moshe Emet, the Torah Emet. Hashem gave it to him b'nevuah. Moshe brought it down. It's Torat Moshe. How could there be Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu does not know? Chas v'shalom. They say it can't be. And it might even be what Moshe Rabbeinu is kind of asking. Hashem, give the Torah to Rebbe Akiva if he knows more than me. But we know that can't be true. So we already gave two answers to this question. One answer is, no, he just didn't get there yet. Yeah, no. This whole story, when he learns Halacha Moshe Sinai, ultimately Rebbe Akiva, or he hears Rebbe Akiva say, oh, Moshe is going to learn this. So meaning Moshe knows he has this Torah inside of him. He just it hasn't been revealed yet. Okay, that's one approach. The other approach that we said, that it could be that Rebbe Akiva is shining light on something that's in the greater light of Moshe Rabbeinu. That Rebbe Akiva is zoning into a part of the light of Moshe Rabbeinu, a part of his Torah. It's Halacha Moshe Sinai. Moshe just hadn't revealed that part. Okay, but let's look now at the Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai gives a couple of interesting approaches in the Ben Hoyada. I want to look at two of his approaches. He says, first off, a really deep idea. Rebbe Akiva is reaching the greatest heights of the Torah. He makes it up to the crowns, but he says there's heights of Torah at different levels of Torah. It's a little bit deep, a little bit complicated, but he says in one area of Torah that he says is a lower level than Moshe Rabbeinu, that is where he reached the crowns. Meaning, he actually writes about it in mystical terms of where is the soul of Moshe coming from a higher sphira. Rebbe Akiva is coming from a lower level, but on his lower level he gets to the Keter. Okay, let's try to say with the idea in maybe a simpler mashal, in simpler terms. We know that there's the partis of the Torah. There's the pshat, remez, drush, and sword. There's the different levels to learn the Torah, with the sword being on the deepest levels. So it's possible that Moshe Rabbeinu was complete. He was shalem in all four levels of the pardes, including the sod, the deepest of the levels. But for Rebbe Akiva was able to reach heights. He was able to reach the keter, the sodot, of like the level of drush, or like the level of remez. That Rebbe Akiva reached a higher level in a lower part. But Moshe Rabbeinu had the bigger klal. He had the bigger, in his higher level, he had a bigger shleimut. Just in one little aspect, he wasn't as high. I actually saw a similar mashal. Chazal speak about that the tzaddikim latid lavo. Everyone's going to have their own chuppah, their own fiery chuppah. But they're going to look at each other. There's going to be some level of jealousy with of what the other one reached. So I saw one of the Mefarshim say that they're going to be jealous even if someone who's on a lower level to them. Even someone who has a smaller chuppah, there might be a decoration on that chuppah that's a little bit nice. Or like another mashal, if a person is building a mansion with dozens and dozens of rooms of gold and silver, of course the mansion is the great beautiful mansion. But there might be one guy who builds a smaller house of 4 rooms, but in one of the rooms he buys a special fancy painting that's so special, and the owner of the mansion never focused on buying those kind of paintings or buying that painting, and therefore, even though the greater mansion, even though Moshe Rabbeinu is so much greater, but in one room there's Rebbe Akiva who was able to hang one painting. That's the crown. That's the crowns of the letters that Moshe Rabbeinu is like, whoa, that I didn't fully see. Okay, so that's approach number 1 in the Ben Ish Chai. Approach number 2 in the Ben Ish Chai. So this one plays a little bit with time zones, timelines, and time-space continuum. He says, we know before a person comes into this world, he's taught the whole Torah. And he's taught everything's going to learn down below. It's all taught to the baby in the womb. So says the Ben Ish Chai, but when the baby learns it, he's only learning bechoach. He's only learning in potential. That's known as the realm of machshava. It isn't actual reality yet. He didn't bring it into this world. It's not the foal. It's not here. It's only but the baby learns in machshava. And our whole Gemara is kachalava machshava. In machshava, the baby is learning everything, but it will only come into actuality after the baby's born, and at that point the soul, the neshama, comes into the goof, it unites, and now a person has to toil and spend his life learning the Torah to try to megale everything that he'd already learned in potential when he was in the womb. Okay, so in the realm of machshava, before the physical world, this learning is instantaneous. It happens on the spot. But our story, Moshe Rabbeinu was already born. He is in a goof. When he's being brought up to the Marom, he's being brought up to the Rakia, according to the way the Maral learns, Hashem was showing him the potential Rebbe Akiva of the future. That heavenly Rebbe Akiva, that Rebbe Akiva was learning in the yeshiva, in the Marom, in the Lamala, the Ben Ish Chai learns Hashem's not taking Moshe Rabbeinu to the future. He's taking Moshe Rabbeinu to the potential Rebbe Akiva. And in the potential Rebbe Akiva, he already has everything. In potential, it's already there. In the world of Machshava, Rebbe Akiva knows everything. But Moshe Rabbeinu, so at first Moshe Rabbeinu is Tashash Kocho, he becomes disheartened because he's like, what's it going to be? But then he hears, oh no, that's Halacha la Moshe Misinai. So he feels better because he realizes that it's still hidden in him. That the potential is still inside him. He just hasn't reached it yet. He's in real time. He still has to toil and get there. He has to come to our parasha, Vayelech Moshe, the last day of his life. Now Moshe Rabbeinu is going to be able to get to that level. Back to the Ben Ish Chai, says the Ben Ish Chai, he also says that also explains a story they bring down about the Arizal. That one day the Arizal on Shabbat afternoon dozed off for a couple of minutes, and as he dozed off, his lips were moving as if he's speaking, nothing was coming out. When he woke up, one of his Talmidim asked him, he said, Rabbi Arizal, what happened? What was going on? Why were you moving your lips? What happened? He says, oh, I had gone to sleep. My neshama went up and was learning some of the biggest sodot of the story of Bil'am. And the Talmud asked him, okay, can you teach me what you learned? So the Arizal responded that if I start to speak right now, and if I would speak to you straight, what I learned in that 30-minute nap, it would take me 80 years to teach it to you. Explains the Ben Ish Chai, for that half hour that the soul left the goof, that half-hour nap, that going up to the level of machshava, going up to the shamayim, everything is taught instantaneously. 80 years of Torah is being taught in that moment. Now I was thinking, it's interesting in the story though, you see that the Arizal's lips are still moving. So even as the neshama goes up, there are still levels of neshama that remain connected to the goof. Okay, that's the Ben Ish Chai. That the potential is being seen in Rebbe Akiva right now, and Moshe's going to get there. It just isn't in reality just yet. Although, if we're speaking about potential versus reality, so I actually saw in Rav Tzadok, in the Dover Tzedek, he seems to say the opposite. He says that Moshe is really known normally as the Torah Shebichtav. And in the Torah Shebichtav, there is the full potential. Everything is hinted to in the written Torah. But it is only there in the klal, bekoach, in potential, while Rebbe Akiva, he symbolizes the Torah Shebal Peh. He's the fleshing out of all that potential. So each person finding his own prati chidush, his own specific chidush that's inside the Torah, his own letter in the Torah, his own crown in the Torah. And I actually think this works very well with the Abir Yaakov, that while Moshe Rabbeinu knew all 600,000 Dirushim of the Torah, it's up to us throughout the generation to really reveal it, that it's all there in the Torah Shebechtav. That's why Moshe is giving everybody nechama. Yeah, it's all in my Torah. Don't worry. Moshe actually really knows it. It's all in my Torah. It just hasn't been revealed yet, but it's gonna be revealed. It's only a potential in my Torah Shebechtav. Okay. Now, a friend of mine, Michael Kleinman, he sent me some of his notes on this Gemara and a few of other sources, and I think that through some of his ideas, or at least maybe the way I understand his ideas, maybe we can get some even deeper insights into Moshe Rabbeinu's last journey. Okay, so says Rav Kleinman, based on the Leshem, that what does it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't grasp the Tagin? He couldn't grasp these crowns on the letters. So he says that the Leshem says in Sefer Adeya Chelek Bet, I haven't actually not been able to see the source inside just yet, but apparently it says over there that the ideas that are found in the Tagin, they are actually considered to be lower chidushim. They are lower lights, lower ideas that existed within the greater ideas. If we go back to our analogy, that we have ourselves a great light and smaller lights in the great light, the candle in the daytime you don't see. But Moshe Rabbeinu, he represents the otiyot, which are greater lights, and because he was these. He's the greater light. He can't grasp the smaller lights that are within the greater light. He just doesn't see them because he's seeing the much bigger picture. So maybe we could say right now, like we've been saying, Moshe Rabbeinu is now trying to hide some of that light. When as Rashi told us, Lo uchal latzet velavo, Moshe tells us in our parasha, I can't come and go anymore. B'divrei Torah, in Torah, melamed shnistemu mimenu masarot u'mayot ha'chokhmah. It teaches us that parts of the Torah, part of the wells of the Torah, they were satum, they were held up, they were closed up, meaning some of the light is being hidden right now. Moshe Rabbeinu is dying, and as his light is waning, he could now see the details he couldn't see before. But in this concept of choshech, says this Rabbi Kleinman, you also see yisurim. You also see suffering and pain. Rebbe Akiva comes from this darkness. He comes from the difficulties in his life. He represents the world of the details of the pratim. Rebbe Akiva from the Baal Tshuva, from the Bnei Gerim, he doesn't come from the great light. When Moshe Rabbeinu was born, the Midrash tells us that there was a great light in the room. The room was filled with ore. That's not Rebbe Akiva. Rebbe Akiva is coming from the Choshech. Says Rabbi Kleinman beautifully. A person who goes through difficulty in life, through lowliness, through darkness, that person should rejoice. Why? Because in seeing these pratim and being in these details, by living in this Choshech, he has the ability to bring light to areas where someone who's only in light could never get to. That you can see now, in this darkness, you can see details you didn't see in the great light. Now you could help, you can teach, you can inspire, you can bring light to those people that are in that choshech as well, that the greater light person can never do, so we should rejoice. Our hardships in life give us the ability to light up areas for other people. He writes, "V'zeh musar heskel." This is a deep lesson for us to learn. The kabel et bechinat hashvelut v'achoshech, to accept the lowliness in life, the darkness in life. Kmo izdamnut. It's an opportunity lirot pratim, to see the details. She'efshar lirot otam, to see the details that in normal times you can't see. In the dark times, we can see details. We can see things we don't normally see, and now we can bring light to those areas as well. We can bring a smaller light into that darkness. That's really special. That's a major opportunity. We should be happy and jump for joy at the darkness we have in our life. Now, I actually saw a similar idea in the Maharal, in his second approach. In Tiferet Yisrael Siman Samech Gimel, he gives three approaches. How could it be that Rebbe Akiva knew what Moshe Rabbeinu did not know? So actually, let's go through his three approaches. Approach number one, he explains that the Tagin, they symbolize Hasagot Dakot, very nuanced, deep understandings. And he says Moshe Rabbeinu didn't connect to this level of detail because to him, the pratim, he wasn't each pratim. He wasn't a detail person. He represents the klal. He represents the bigger picture. As we've been saying, he's the bigger light. The footnote actually brings down that the Maharal learns in two different ways. What does it mean that he's the klal, he's the bigger picture? So in our source, in the Tiferet Yisrael, the Maharal explains that Moshe Rabbeinu was a person who represents Klal Yisrael. He represents the whole Jewish people. While Rebbe Akiva was an ish prati, was an individual, and this Torah wasn't shayach from the perspective of what the whole Jewish people needed, from the klal perspective of the Torah. In his chidushim on the Gemara, the Maharal says there's a little bit of nuance. He says that Moshe's connection to the Torah comes from the level of nevuah, or Rebbe Akiva comes from the level of chokhmah, we said a similar idea a few weeks ago, contrasting the Torah Shebechtav, Moshe's level to Torah Sheba'al Peh, Rebbe Akiva's level, that when it comes from Chokhmah, that Chokhmah can actually reach levels that are higher than nevuah, but nevuah is more exact from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why the Maharal in different places says that the Chacham could really understand what Olam Haba is all about, but the Navi never saw it. So Moshe Rabbeinu is only giving us Torah from what he saw. It actually might be that Moshe Rabbeinu also got levels of Chokhmah as well, but what he revealed to us was not from the level of nevuah, and that level of perfection can't reveal Tagin. But returning to our Tiferet Yisrael, so Moshe Rabbeinu, he represents the Klal Yisrael. He represents everybody. That so to speak, in the soul of Moshe Rabbeinu, inside is all the souls of all the Jewish people. Just like every neshama has his letter in the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu represents the whole Torah to Moshe. So in the footnote, he brings down that there's actually a different Maharal that says that this explains why Moshe Rabbeinu married Tzipora, a convert. Because if Moshe Rabbeinu represents Klal Yisrael, he represents everybody, the whole, so he's not allowed to marry a Jewish woman because there's no prat, there's no individual woman who could marry a Yisrael who corresponds to all of Yisrael. So rather you have to bring in somebody from the outside. Now, the Anutati, I was thinking maybe we see this concept of coming from the outside. That's the ticket to getting to the highest levels. Moshe Rabbeinu marries a convert. Rebbe Akiva is the son of converts. To get to this highest level of Torah, we need a connection to somewhere much lower, somewhere more outside. Actually, we brought down a few years ago from a mystical source that ultimately Moshe Rabbeinu has to separate from Tzipora for the sake of Klal Yisrael, for the sake of the Nevuah that he's going to give to the Jewish people. But we said that there's one Kabbalistic source that explains that because he separated from Tzipora, that's what held him back from the Sha'ar Nun. So maybe we can say because he doesn't have that connection to the Gerim, to the converts, to that level on the outside. Once you lack that connection, you can't really get there. Although we also said a couple weeks ago that Moshe Rabbeinu has to go down because of those converts. The Erev Rav are the ones that sinned for the Egel HaZahav, so he's actually going down to be with them. That actually makes him go down. But again, we're saying this concept of going down is for the purpose of going up. Sheva Yipol Tzaddik Vekam, the Tzaddik has to fall, but when he falls, now he can jump up even higher, he can get even greater. Now, this idea that Moshe Rabbeinu represents the Klal of Klal Yisrael, he represents everything. I actually think this might work very well with the Gemara that discusses in a machloket how much of the Torah did Moshe Rabbeinu actually get at Matan Torah. Says the Gemara in Sotah, Daf Lamed Zayin, Amud Bet, Ubiplukta Dahani Tanai Detanya. There's a machloket in a Breita of Rabbi Yishmael and Rebbe Akiva. Rabbi Yishmael Omer Klalot Ne'emru B'Sinai Upratot Be'ohel Moed. Rabbi Yishmael holds, I think Rabbi Yishmael works very well with what we're saying right now, that Moshe Rabbeinu received all the klalim, all the klalot, all the general principles, the general mitzvot. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu received at Har Sinai together with the first luchot. But the pratim, the pratot, the individual details, that only came later in the Ohel Moed. Now, when is it later in the Ohel Moed? So we said right now from our talk of Yonatan, Moshe Rabbeinu is now going to the Beit Midrash. He's going to the Ohel Moed according to many Mefarshim. What's the Beit Midrash? It's the Ohel Moed. It's the Ohel. That's where he teaches the Torah. Meaning now he's going to Ohel Moed to learn those details. Now at the end of his life, he's getting to those pratim. But in general, he only got the klal at Sinai. Now Rebbe Akiva argues. Now it's funny because our whole Torah is really about Rebbe Akiva. Rebbe Akiva argues, "Ve'omer klalot upratot nemru b'Sinai." Moshe Rabbeinu learned it all at Mount Sinai. V'nishno be'ohel moed, repeated in the Ohel Moed. V'nishtalshu be'avot Moav, and it was repeated a third time in the plains of Moab before Moshe Rabbeinu dies in our Sefer Devarim when he's closing off with the whole Torah. Okay. Similarly, we find in the Gemara Chagiga, Daf Vav Amud Aleph, Rabbi Yishmael Omer Klalot Nemru B'Sinai Upratot Be'ohel Moed. Rabbi Akiva Omer Klalot Upratot Nemru B'Sinai V'Yishnu Be'ohel Moed V'Shashu Be'arbot Moab. Again, that Gemara also says this machloket Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva, but at least according to Rabbi Yishmael, the pratim were only learned by Moshe Rabbeinu later on, only in the Ohel Moed. So therefore, we could say that he really, at this point, when he's going up to the Shamayim, he's only in the world of Klal, or maybe now he's only beginning. Now is the time for Moshe Rabbeinu to finally learn those pratim by sitting in the Beit Midrash Rebbe Akiva. He's now going to get those. He's going to now finally learn those final points. Now, the Midrash in Shmot Rabbah, this is Perek Mem Aleph Siman Vav, actually drives home this point that Moshe Rabbeinu did not have all the details, at least not yet. Davar acher, ve'iten el Moshe, Amar Rabbi Abau, kol 40 yom shasa Moshe lemala, says Rabbi Abau, all 40 days that he was up on Mount Sinai, hayal omed Torah v'shocheach. He would learn Torah, and then he would forget what he was learning. Now, interesting, we have this concept of shichecha. Again, I think this Midrash is also talking about the second luchot, because we know by the first luchot, there was no shichecha, unless you want to say that by the end of this Midrash, shichecha is taken away as a present. Oh, we'll get there. Amarlo, Ribona Olam, Yeshli Arba'im Yom, Ve'eni Yodea Davar. I've been up here for 40 days, God. I don't know anything. Me'asa Kadosh Baruch Hu, Mishishlim Arba'im Yom, when he completed the 40 days, Natan lo Kadosh Baruch Hu et Torah matana. Hashem gave him the Torah as a present. Shneimar Beiten el Moshe, V'chi kol Torah lamad Moshe. Now, but did Moshe learn the whole Torah? Ketib bat Torah, aruka me'eretz midah, v'urchava minei yam. The Torah is so vast, it's so wide, it's wider than the yam, the 50. Ula arba'im yom le'madam Moshe. Can Moshe really learn it in 40 days? It can't be. Ela klalim limdahu kakodesh baruch hu leMoshe. And rather, Hashem only taught Moshe Rabbeinu the klalim, the general principles. Have kechaloto ledeberito, and that's why it says kechaloto ledeberito. When Hashem completed speaking to him, kechaloto. So at that ending, when Hashem gave him that matana, He's giving him really only the klalim. This Midrash says clearly the Torah is way too great. He only got the principles. And there's almost an identical Midrash Tanchuma, Perek Tet Zayin, where over there also it says that Moshe Rabbeinu was learning, forgetting. And then eventually Hashem gave it to him as a matana. And then it says, V'ki kol Torah lamad Moshe, but he learned it all. V'alo ketiv aruka me'eretz midah, ela klalim limda kadosh baruch hu leMoshe, shneimar kechaloto. Again, kechaloto is a hint that he only learned the klal. Moshe Rabbeinu did not get the bigger picture. Now, returning to my side question, how could he forget? Can you really forget with the first luchot? So even if you want to say we're talking about the first luchot, and Hashem at the very end gave him matana, so he shouldn't forget, but why is he forgetting? Well, what takes place? It says now kechaloto. At the very end is when he gives him the matana. He gives him these first luchot. But what's happening at the very end right now? At this very end is when the Jewish people are sitting down below with the egel, and Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu, lech red, and he's going to ultimately have to break these luchot, and shichecha is going to come into the world. So this whole forgetfulness up above might even be a hint to the fact that we're sitting down below and we're going to have a second luchot, even if we want to say that this Midrash is talking about the first set of luchot. But again, according to this approach of the Midrashim, this goes very well with our Gemara, that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't understand the crowns, because the crowns are, according to the Maral, according to the Leshem, they're these more specifics, these pratim, but Moshe, at least at Mount Sinai, only got the klal, he only gets the pratim later in the Ohel Moed. But again, we saw that Rebbe Akiva disagreed. He said Moshe got it all at the very, very beginning, and that's where we're going to find many other Gemarot that say Moshe Rabbeinu knew everything, he knew every single detail. Va'amar Rebbe Akiva bar Abba, Amar Rebbe Yochanan, Sabgram Megillah, Daf Yutet Amud Bet. My dichti. What does it mean the pasuk? Va'alehem kechol advarim asher diber Hashem imachem bahar. What are kol advarim? What are all the words that Hashem taught? Melamed sheherawa Kadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe. This teaches us that Hashem showed Moshe diktukei Torah, v'diktukei sofrim umasha sofrim atidim lechadesh. That Moshe learned all the hints of the Torah, the specifics of the Torah, specifics of what the rabbis are going to learn, and even what the sofrim, even what the rabbis, the scribes are going to mechadesh in the future. Even that was shown to Moshe Rabbeinu. So according to this Gemara, it seems that he was shown everything. Now, interesting. We're going to come back to this idea of shown, shehera'u, ra'ah versus gilui. There might be a nuance in this, but at least according to the simple read of this Gemara, Moshe Rabbeinu was taught everything. This seems to be going with the opinion of Rebbe Akiva. Moshe got it all, because the Gemara even closes off umay nihu, and what do we and what is the specifics that is going to be mechadesh in the future? What laws? What thing was Moshe Rabbeinu saw? Mikra Megillah, the reading of the Megillah. Masechet Megillah is talking about the Derabanan holiday of Purim with the Derabanan mitzvah of reading the Megillah. Even that was shown to Moshe Rabbeinu according to this Gemara. So too in Masechet Berachot, this Daf Hey Amud Aleph, it says, "Va'amar Levi Bar Chama, Amar Bishum ben Lakish, Mai dichti." What's the pasuk mean? It says, "Ve'etenal lechad luchot ha'even." That Hashem gave him this luchot ha'even, va'torah, va'mitzvah, shekatavti lerotam. So what does it mean? Luchot and Torah and mitzvah. What are all these words? Luchot, elu asar tadibrot. Torah ze mikra, v'mitzvah zo mishnah. Asher katavti elu neviim uktuvim. Ulehorotam ze Talmud. Melamed shekulam nitlu leMoshe misinai. Says Rabbi Levi Bar Chama, in the name of Shimon ben Lakish, Moshe Rabbeinu was taught everything, even the Navi, the Ketubim, the Gemara, oral Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu got it all on Har Sinai. Again, it seems to be these Gemarot are going like the opinion of Rebbe Akiva, that even the Pratim were given to Moshe Rabbeinu. Nevertheless, in the Torah Tamimah, he still learns that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have every last detail. And he says our Gemara of Rebbe Akiva being Doresh the crowns is a proof. So we can take these Gemarot and make them as machlokets of opinions, or we could try to matzdik every Gemara according to Rebbe Akiva, and to try to understand every Gemara according to Rebbe Yishmael. It seems to be Torah Tamimah wants to say that even in the opinions of Rebbe Akiva, that Moshe learned everything, but that doesn't really mean everything. Actually, the answer that I found in most mefarshim that most want to bring down, if you've seen it in Orach HaMakadosh, you see it in the Haida, you see it in Litvish Svarim. I actually saw it was actually sourced all the way back to the Arizal and the Shulchan Aruch Arizal. That to reconcile these ideas that Rebbe Akiva knew more than Moshe. No. He says Moshe Rabbeinu, he knew everything, but he knew everything as nevuah because Hashem told him everything. What does it mean that Hashem is being kosher the ktarim? That Hashem is tying the crowns on the letters? That means that Hashem is, so to speak, showing you where that teaching, that Torah Sheba'al Peh, that deep secret, where is it hinted to in the Torah? Or where the future Torah Sheba'al Peh, where is that going to be hinted to in the actual Torah? So he says Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know that. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know how to tie the teaching to the letters. Rebbe Akiva was the one who was able to doresh every little detail. And that's why Rebbe Akiva was able to doresh even that final that every et was darshan except for one. Rebbe Akiva could finally darshan the last et, aleph, taf in the Torah. Rebbe Akiva knows how to connect all the teachings to the Torah. But the truth of the matter is, when it comes to Moshe Rabbeinu, he didn't need to connect it because the whole de'ah, they'd heard Hashem speak to them. They'd seen those first luchot. They had heard HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They saw the sounds of the shofar. They were approaching everything as nevuah. They didn't need to connect it. It's only later generations that are going to need us to know where it came from. Rabbi Khan brings down in his sefer that in the generation of Rebbe Akiva, there's the tzedukim. You have people who are questioning the oral Torah in general, and they only want to learn Torah shebechtav. So we need the great ones like Rebbe Akiva to tie those tagin onto the letters, to tie the drasha, to tie the remez, to tie the Talmud, the Gemara, the oral Torah, to attach it all to the actual letters of the Torah. Rabbi Khan brings down in a footnote that Chazal tell us that the angel Sandal, we're going to say his name in the hint, Sandal was the one to tie the crowns on the letters up in the Shamayim. That was the angel, that was his job. Sandal is also known as the Metorgeman. He's known as the great translator, which hints to this ability to communicate, of the oral Torah, to attach the oral Torah to the written Torah. You're communicating, you're speaking, but where does it come from? How do we tie it back on? That was the job of the angel Sandal. That's the job of Rebbe Akiva, who symbolizes the oral Torah, but that's not the job of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, I saw another approach in Sefer Yakar Oraita that it was impossible for Moshe Rabbeinu to know every last crown because the Torah is infinite. The Yama Torah, Yama Gematria 50, it's infinite. It's impossible for Moshe Rabbeinu, who's a finite human being, who's alive in a physical body, you can't know the infinite. Yes, there's a written Torah that predates the world, but the oral Torah, that's endless. So therefore, it can't be that Moshe knows every last thing. He has to maybe learn the source of those last things, the shorish, the klal, the ot of those last things. But to know the limitless is impossible for a physical person. I saw in the Meshech Chochmah that he explains that if Moshe Rabbeinu understood everything, even all the hints to the future, then that would take away the ability of free will. Because we know the Torah does hint to everything. It hints to every event that's ever going to happen. But we also have Bechira. We also have our free will. And if Moshe Rabbeinu was taught exactly all those the future, then we couldn't choose anymore. He's taught that. The teacher teaches to us. Maybe he can be seen it, but he can't teach it to us. In Sefer Be'er Sheva, he explains that the famous Chazal that says that the Devarim that were niglu to Rebbe Akiva and his colleagues, Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't reveal it. It's actually a Midrash in Bamidbar Rabbah, Perik Yud Tet, Siman Vav. We spoke about this in the past, a couple years ago by Purim time, that Hashem is like speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu about the Parah Adumah, about the Chukim, that you can't fully grasp everything. I'll give you a hint, I'll give you a glimpse, but he says, Dvarim amechusin mikem ba'olam hazeh, atidin liot tzofim le'olam haba. He says things that are hidden right now, but in olam haba, and we're going to see all the Torah of Rebbe Akiva we're talking about seems to be a Torah of olam haba. They're going to be revealed. But then skipping a little bit in the Midrash, he says, Hashem says that there are some things, Shekfar Siti Rebbe Akiva v'chaverav. There are some things that ultimately Rebbe Akiva did get. And he says the Midrash, Devarim shelo niglu leMoshe, niglu leRebbe Akiva v'chaverav. The Pasuk says, V'kol yakar v'ata eino, ze Rebbe Akiva v'chaverav. There was yakar, the front of the tefillin, we spoke about yakar being tefillin. There are things that Rebbe Akiva and his colleagues, they saw that Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't see. So explains the Be'er Sheva, if you look closely at the language, it says that there were things that were niglu, And then there were things that we saw in the Gemara and Megillah Yutet, Melamed Shehera HaKadosh Baruch Hu LeMoshe Diklei Torah V'Diklei Sofrim U'Mashal V'Dil Chadash. The Gemara Megillah says that Hashem showed Moshe Rabbeinu Shehera everything, but our Midrash says Niglu. Niglu is a language of Gilui, to reveal. Moshe Rabbeinu was Herau. Moshe Rabbeinu saw everything, but he wasn't allowed to explain it and teach it. There was parts of the Torah that Moshe's generation wasn't allowed to see, wasn't supposed to see, or maybe didn't need to see, but he knew those ideas. He understood it all. He just wasn't allowed to reveal it. And I think it actually works even better with our Rebbe Yaakov, who says that Moshe Rabbeinu is coming to Menachem, the people in our parasha, to tell them, don't worry, the Torah of the future, it's not lost. I saw it, it's there, and it's going to be revealed. We're just not allowed to reveal it just yet. Okay, but let's go back to the Maharal. So the Maharal, the first approach is this concept of klal versus prat, and Rebbe Akiva being able to connect to the prat. Moshe Rabbeinu maybe only now being able to be able to connect to the prat, as I want to try to explain in our Gemara. In his second approach, though, he explains that the tagin are the sodot that really come from the upper worlds, the upper realms, olam haba, the heavens, the shamayim. They don't connect directly to olam hazeh. And he says Moshe was the leader of the people in Olam Hazeh. As the Midrash says, he was half Elyonim, half Tachtonim, but it's important that he was still half Tachtonim. He was still grounded in this world. It says that the Torah was given to this world because of Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe Rabbeinu is this Olam Hazeh, Lo B'Shamayim. He's bringing it down to the people. But he says, the Maharal, in his second approach, Rebbe Akiva was not part of Olam Hazeh. Because, what do you mean it was part of Olam Hazeh? He wasn't in this world. No, all the Yisurim, all the suffering that he endured, not just Rebbe Akiva, but all of Chaverav, all the 10 martyrs. Do you know why they were revealed the secrets that Moshe didn't get? Because they weren't connected to Olam Hazeh. When Rebbe Akiva's flesh is being combed off, he's being disconnected from Olam Hazeh. The Tagin are the Torah of the Shamayim. Only someone disconnected from Olam Hazeh can fully understand it. And thus, it's not a chisaron, it's not a lacking in Moshe Rabbeinu, because Moshe needed to be part of Olam Hazeh. He's the leader of the Jewish people. Lech Red, it's your job to be with Am Yisrael. You have to be in Olam Hazeh. But Rebbe Akiva and all of the 10 martyrs, they themselves, in their suffering and their torture and their yisurin, they're being removed from Olam Hazeh. And that's their ticket to get to the Torah of the Tagin, the Torah of the Olam Haba, of the Shamayim. Now I saw in the Leshem, in Sefer HaKadamot, in Sharim, in Shar Daled, Perek Aleph, so there it says, when Moshe Rabbeinu asked the Kadosh Baruch Hu, can I really see your front? I want to get to the Lifnim. I actually really want to see you. I want a deeper revelation. After he did the tshuva for the Jewish people, we had the Chet HaEgel, we had the sin. Maybe this tshuva is going to be our ticket to get to the Shar Nun. Now he's asking Kadosh Baruch Hu, I want a deeper revelation. Hashem says, no, I'm sorry, you can't. Because if you can't see me and live, you can't be in Olam Hazeh and be alive, I'll only show you my Achor. Chazor al-Achorecha, go back, go to the Achor. Says the Leshem, interesting, he says, why did Moshe think that now he can maybe be Zocheh to see the front? Because he had just gone for the last 40 days without food and without drink. He was so much less goof. He had become so much less physical. He become so much more neshama. If now he was a neshama that didn't need to eat, so now he's less physical. So we said, we have sin, we have tshuva, we have darkness, we have suffering, we have less of Olam Hazeh. All of that comes together that Moshe it says, now I want to see more. But apparently the Akash Baruch Hu says, no, okay, you reached the level to see the back of the tefillin. I'm going to make a big revelation right now for you, and you're going to come down glowing, but you're not going to be that level of Rebbe Akiva who gets to see the Yakar, who gets to see the front, or at least not that's going to have to wait till the last day of your life. Okay, so that's approach number 2 of the Maharal, that it's only a person who's disconnected from Olam Hazeh who can get to the Tagin, and Moshe Rabbeinu is not allowed to disconnect from Olam Hazeh, at least not until the last day of his life, when he ascends Har Nebo. Now, to complete the Maharal, he gives a third approach, which I actually really think builds on the second approach. He says that Moshe Rabbeinu's approach to the Torah is to understand it bishlemut, to understand it perfectly, to have a perfect, complete understanding. But he says the Torah of the Tagin, these are the Sodot. He says Sodot, they're only revealed little by little. That's why the Tagin, they're little lines. He also explains that's why Olam Haba is seen as the letter Yud, which is the smallest of the letter, and it's only hinted to Olam Haba. You don't have details of Olam Haba in the Torah Shebichtav. There's an extra Yud in the creation of the world, the Yitzar, with a double Yud over there that hints to Olam Haba. So he says, because you only get little glimpses, only tiny bits. There's not shlemut in understanding these deep secrets and in understanding the Torah of Olam Haba. But Moshe Rabbeinu needs shlemut because he's supposed to represent this Olam Hazeh. I'm combining a little bit the third and the second, so I think they fit together very nice. That that ultimately Moshe Rabbeinu's tafkid is to understand the bigger picture, the shleimut, and you can't get shleimut in the sodot, and therefore Moshe Rabbeinu has less of a shayachut to that. So to summarize what we said until now, Moshe Rabbeinu is coming into the Beit Midrash of Rebbe Akiva to learn the Torah of Rebbe Akiva, the Torah of the Pratim, the Torah of Olam Haba, the Torah of suffering, the Torah of Tshuva, the Torah with inside darkness. And the truth is, this Gemara is actually part of a much larger Gemara that speaks about how the Sofrim write the letters and all the depth and mystical thoughts that take place when a Sofer writes the beautiful otiyot of the Torah and then ultimately adds those little tagin, those little crowns on. So B'ezrat Hashem, in the next part, I want to return to the next part of this Gemara, which continues with the letters of the Torah to try to come up with this bigger idea of what Moshe Rabbeinu's final lesson is really all about.